Here's a question you probably weren't expecting from a recommendation video for Ryse, Son of Rome. What does a button do? It's a question you're going to be asking yourself a lot playing this game, because input is simplified to the point of automation. Take combat, for example. There's 3 buttons, one to strike, one to break defense, and another to riposte. The aim is to make gameplay hassle-free, avoid distracting you with memorizing combos and instead letting you focus on timing and flow. But what you'll soon realize when pulling off special execution moves is that your input matters very little. The inputs are color-coded, but if you fluff it, rather than the ancient Britain regaining the upper hand, the execution is pulled off without a hitch. The only penalty is fewer experience points. After a while, you won't even bother inputting the correct buttons at the right time. It's easier just to mash any old buttons and move on to the next victim. For a power fantasy about playing as a big burly centurion saving Rome single-handedly from savages and corrupt rulers, it's ironic that you have as much power as a pedestrian in a busy city. See, this is traffic light gaming. You push the button, you wait. You don't push it, you wait. Ryse is full of these placebo buttons. So why am I recommending it? Well, it's free through Xbox Games Pass and pre-owned copies cost next to nothing. But it also brings into stark relief gamers' fears about the de-skilling potential of button mashing. You don't quite get the same feeling with a similarly button-focused game like Asura's Wrath, for instance. In that game, the authenticity of control is never in question. With Ryse, however, I began to think about the false agency that buttons provide. Do the buttons do anything? How authentic is my level of control? Is feeling you can make a difference enough? Computer science design is full of these benevolent deceptions, graceful degradations of the system included to make it appear infallible. After all, Ryse is a simplistic hassle-free game by design. It's a power fantasy, like exercise bike gaming, fast and relentless but monotonous. Your focus is on building combos to activate Burning Eagle mode, which boosts your critical hits. The story isn't demanding, it's rife with anachronisms like Boudica invading Rome atop a war elephant, Nero having sons, and improbable technologies. You follow the ascendancy of Marius Titus from legionary to general as he embarks on a revenge quest to Rome's northernmost province, Britannia, to avenge his dead parents and sister. Meanwhile, Rome is in terminal decline under the rule of a fictionalized Emperor Nero, which will need resolving before curtains close. Ryse pulls more from cinematic history than actual historical record, a fact made abundantly clear in its portrayal of Britannia as Rome's Afghanistan. The comparison may seem churlish, but it's one that films around the time of the game's release, Centurion and The Eagle of the North, for example, were apt to make. See, at the dawn of the 21st century, the word of the hour was empire, as the United States marched to war against terror following 9/11. Serious parallels were drawn between America and ancient Rome as undisputed leaders of their respective worlds, dominant militarily, culturally, economically, and technologically. The two were seen as commensurate superpowers. However, by the early 2010s, as the war in the Middle East drew on and on, the answer to the question of whether the United States, like Rome, was either on the rise or headed for a fall was written on the silver screen. Peplum films traded sun-kissed Mediterranean vistas for boggy northern England and Scotland to tackle stories about Britain's past as the northernmost province of Rome's empire. Rome provided the ideal template for thinking about its 21st century counterpart as a superpower invading a country and encountering disproportionate guerrilla resistance. The modern parallels were obvious. Films like Centurion showed a mighty army overconfidently setting out to defeat an inhospitable mountainous land controlled by bloodthirsty warlords. Ryse follows in a similar vein, asking audiences to sympathise with the invading army while simultaneously questioning the ethics of the war itself. The ancient Britons are framed as antique Apache warriors or Boudican Taliban fighters to the Centurion's cowboys or combat personnel. The Picts beyond Hadrian's Wall look more like the cannibals in the 13th Warrior than their historical counterparts, obsessed with blood rituals and sacrificial wicker men. More than anything, Ryse feels like a greatest hits album of vignettes from 2000s and 2010s Sword and Sandals movies. So you have Gladiator, Centurion, and even 300. Ryse failed to impress critics when it launched alongside the Xbox One, and it's easy to see why. Visually impressive at the time, the game was excoriated for its extremely repetitive gameplay. It remains a visual showcase, but the push-button combat is exhausting. Nevertheless, I think it's worth trying out today as an example of what happens when designers completely de-skill players. A major casualty of this de-skilling is any pride or achievement, leaving us with just a subpar revenge story and flashy graphics. Ryse makes you realise how much of a thin line between skill and automation buttons in and out of video games are. They're a way of short-circuiting human agency, but as criticisms about button mashing in fighting games, for example, suggest, this is simultaneously appealing and appalling. Ryse exposes a fundamental tension. Buttons need players to press them, but so little is required of players to enact these presses. So, if you're feeling like you have currently too much control in your life, resign yourself to Ryse, Son of Rome, and let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Until next time, see you around.